Dear friends, when the going gets really rough and tough, democracy fosters hope against hope. And we have here with us one such hope, Rana Ayyub, a journalist who not only speaks truth to power, but speaks about power, questions power, challenges it, an inspiration to hundreds of journalists who toil day and night to protect the foundations of democracy. A hearty welcome, Rana Ayyub.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
So, Rana, in fact, before we move on to the media landscape, let me have some of your impressions about Kerala, the land of Malayalis, who Amartya Sen uphold as the vibrant example of being argumentative Indian.
Good morning, everybody. It's a delight to be in Kerala. I consider myself a little bit of Malayali myself because I was raised by Malayalis growing up. My sister-in-law is from Kannur. My nieces and nephews watch Malayalam films. I can understand Malayalam. I can still speak a little bit from whatever I have of my childhood. But growing up, we lived in a place near the Mumbai airport, the Sahar village, and just opposite our house used to be the Ayyappa temple, and right next to it is the CPIM office. And every year during the Ayyappa celebration, the water used to go from my house for the food preparation and the prasadam and everything. So back in the day, of course. If the water was contaminated, my family would not be accused of water jihad. If it happens today, it might just happen. But it was a beautiful time, and Kerala has always been the bastion of liberal ideas for me. It's a place where I feel safe to express myself. It's a place that has always welcomed me, made me feel a part of their own. So thank you so much for having me. And I think what is most reassuring is to see a very young audience here, which means there is hope for the country. We do not have to be disillusioned just yet. Very, very hopeful. To see all of you early morning. I mean, I can't wake up early morning. So if you've all woken up and you're here, it's a great thing to see all of you.
So, Rana, that's fine. You went after the 2002 Gujarat riots like anything. I was wondering, have you ever thought of going after demonetization or the Pulwama incident? I think as we go on speaking about the changing media landscape in contemporary India, I think this question is very relevant.
This question will also give me a sedition charge, sir. That's the last thing we all need besides all the other charges that we have. I did not go after Gujarat riots. It is something that I was in Gujarat as a relief worker when 2002 happened. And later, I stumbled upon the Gujarat fake encounters, which I had to kind of investigate. Having said that, they are very, very crucial stories. There is an investigation that I'm working on for the last 5 years now. I have no idea where I'm going to publish it, but it concerns national security, and I'm going to work on it. And at some point, I'm going to publish. But I think it's pertinent about talking about the present media landscape. Mr. Rajagopalan gave us an excellent insight about what it means to be a journalist and the culture of fear in India, right? The culture of fear is so intense that when I go for international platforms, when I speak at international events, I was speaking at the Aspen Security Summit very recently, and the audience was Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and everybody else from the US State Department and the White House. And I was seated next to Nirupama Rao, and it was Shiv Shankar Menon, and there were two people from the American establishment. We were supposed to talk about India. Now, when I'm talking about India and sliding of democratic values, I was very scared how would that be perceived in my home country. So I started the conversation saying, I love my country. Now, these are caveats we never used to add before. It was like your love for your country was as a given. You didn't have to proclaim it and wear on your sleeves, right? But the culture of fear that anything could be held against you, where Mr. Modi is confronted with the idea of India is so dangerous right now that every time you tweet anything, you have to think twice. The culture of fear that Mr. Rajagopalan said is there everywhere. We are tweeting, we are reporting, thinking about the consequences. Yesterday, I was speaking to some editor. He said he's giving his journalist training about what happens when cops land at your doorstep. If a journalism organization is giving training about what to do when cops are at your doorstep, which means the emergency is right here. It need not be imposed. So I think talking about Pulwama, these are sensitive topics, and I hope some investigation is done. Well, demonetization is for everybody to see. I think the television media, some of them did a very good job of it, especially in the Hindi media, the way they reported the stories from rural India about what demonetization was doing to people. I think there is space for investigative journalism, and I'm sure there is a session in the afternoon about investigative journalism with Leena and everybody else, and I'm sure we will discuss more. But I don't see it happening as much. It is happening in niche organizations, and I do hope we investigate more, we write more. We need more platforms. Unfortunately, some of us are forced to write in international publications like the Washington Post. I really wish I could write an Indian publication as freely as I write for the Washington Post, and I know it's not going to happen.
You referred to the presence of fear, fear is almost palpable. And I remember Gopal Krishna Gandhi speaking at Thiruvananthapuram some years back. He was asked this question. Now you are standing here, you are criticizing the government, and yet you are saying that there is fear, that there is no democracy, there is no freedom of expression. But at the same time, you are standing here and criticizing the establishment. Then Gopal Krishna Gandhi said, it is like this. We may say the air is polluted, but we are still breathing. So the element of fear is there, and we know it, but still we are doing what we can at our best.
I mean, we're all trying, right? I mean, given the circumstances, honestly, I was telling my family that I really am at a threshold in my life that I really want to give up. And there are many, many instances. For instance, the number of brown envelopes that I have got in the last 2 years, there is a drawer in which I have kept all the brown envelopes that I get from the Indian government. Every time I get it, right? Every time, and it comes, all the Indian notices from the Indian government come with speed post. So you see the good old postman after a long time. You don't see the courier guys, you see the postman because he's the one who comes to deliver the notices. So you get the income tax notice and you get the ED notice, and then there's a tribunal notice. I've recently got a defamation case for an article I wrote on Sanatan Sanstha in 2009. I'm just facing defamation for it in this year. After 19 years, a defamation case has been filed against me. And the allegation is that I, accused number 2, is a practicing Muslim, hence prejudiced. I wonder what kind of court has given me a summon for something like this. But we are living in a country, and it is exhausting because you don't know what utterance will land you in trouble. I mean, the ED was investigating me, interrogating me last year. Last year, at some point, they interrogated me for 13 hours. And my bank account statements were put in front of me. And she asked me about one entry which was coming recurringly. She says, who's this doctor? Not doctor, there was somebody, it was my psychiatrist's name, but I don't want to mention. He said, why do you pay 5,000 every 2 weeks? And she kept on marking it in red. So I said, ma'am, that's my psychiatrist. If you were a journalist in India, you would also need one. Right? So it's like she kept on, and this is the kind of questions that I am asked. If the ED asks you about your 100 rupees Swiggy bill, it's not just terrifying you, it's also humiliating you when you have to give account for 100 rupees Swiggy bill. The way the way the income tax loose, the way the Ghaziabad police, the Indirapuram police interrogated me over a tweet that I put about the lynching of a Muslim man. This gentleman who said, off record, he said great things about me. But when he was interrogating me, he said, but madam, why do you write for Washington Post and Time magazine? Why don't you write for an Indian publication? I said, sir, please use your good offices and get me a byline. No, get me a byline in any mainstream publication and I'll write for them. So yes, there is an atmosphere of fear, and yes, many of us are speaking. When the NewsClick raid happened, my biggest fear is not as much NewsClick will get solidarity. We saw what was happening at the press club. My biggest fear was the chilling effect it will have on young journalists, and there are many of them here. What will these young journalists think of the profession? How will their parents respond to these threats when they are asking their kids to be ready for a midnight or a early morning knock as they do these days, what am I telling them? Most of these young independent journalists who are reporting at great risk to their lives do not have legal coverage, do not have psychiatric help. They're still risking themselves. So I feel like we have let down an entire generation of young journalists. We are not leaving behind a legacy of speaking truth to power. We are not leaving behind a legacy of moral integrity, which I think, back in the day, my father was a part of the progressive writers movement. He used to write for the Blitz. And he used to tell me that, if you have anything more than a glass of water with a politician when you're going to interview them, you're obliged to them. So you're not supposed to have anything more than a glass of water. Now we are living in a time when
there is no free lunch. Huh?
When editors flaunt their access to the wedding parties of politicians, and you wonder, are we too old fashioned? Do we have to kind of catch up with the present time, or something is terribly wrong? Something is festering which is terribly wrong.
As for Prabir Purkayastha, who was arrested a few days back, I think this kind of an experience is not new to him. You may be you may be knowing that he was arrested on 25th September 1975 during the emergency, and he was mistaken for the then SFI unit president of JNU, Devidas Tripathi. The police came in search of Tripathi, and they asked Prabir, "Are you Tripathi?" And Prabir said, "No, I am not Tripathi." But they just didn't listen to it, and he was thrown into the vehicle, and he was taken away. And he was released only after 1 year. So that was a gruesome experience to the young Prabir Purkayastha. But now he has been arrested again by another state, another regime. So what do you think that has really changed in between?
I think back in the day when he was arrested, at least the emergency was declared. So at least on paper, we knew what we were fighting up against. Right now, we are fighting up against what we believe is emergency, which is not declared. So we are technically in a functional democracy, which is not showing any democratic attributes. I will not go on the merits of the case, but two things are very clear. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the sedition charge, the terrorist charge against journalists is a new law by even the standards of the government. But and the way the phones and the gadgets of journalists, I mean, we always believe that journalism sources are sacrosanct, right? That we cannot reveal our sources. But now so many of us are using encryptions. Not everybody understands what an encryption looks like. I think it doesn't. I think at the press club the other day, when I saw at the Delhi press club, journalists were interviewing journalists, right? When was the last time you saw journalists becoming the stories? The biggest casualty of the Modi era is that the journalists are becoming the stories themselves. That's the biggest caveat we used to tell ourselves, that we should never make ourselves the stories. But unfortunately, we have to speak up for ourselves, because not many people are going to speak up for yourself. Not many, because we are becoming the enemies of the state. And when history is being written, I hope the role of journalism and journalists is recorded. But we are going through one of the toughest times in our period as a democracy. And what has happened to NewsClick could happen to any one of us. And as India leads into the general elections, I think it's going to be a much, much more dangerous time ahead for everybody. And we are all protecting ourselves. We are all speaking to our lawyers time and again. Every time one person is arrested, everybody else goes into a shell. That is where we are. We are self-censoring ourselves. Self-censorship, I think it's probably is a death of all democratic ideas, and that's exactly what we are doing, self-censoring ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a very key element, self-censorship. I remember Perumal Murugan, the author who was resurrected by the High Court of Madras. He made a statement one day that even after the High Court gave him assurance that you should write, you should continue writing, and he started writing, but he said that there was something within his heart, within his soul, and every time he tries to write a word, he will think twice. Yeah. Should I use this word? Am I antagonizing the establishment? Will this hurt the sentiments of different sects of people? So all these questions will bombard him, and by the time he decides to choose to write, I think he may not be in a position to use that accurate, exact word. So that is self-censorship. So self-censorship, I think even journalists, as you pointed out rightly, we all face this crisis every day in our life. And Rajgopal, I think he also spoke about that when he had to compromise on some of the headlines because the element of fear is there, and we always think, we always question ourselves, will this affect our institute? Will this affect our newspaper, our media organization? And we may just keep away from using that very word.
I think what self-censorship does is dilute at the very passion with which we report a story. You go on the ground, you see the grief, you see the pain, and by the end of it, the way you are, I mean, there was a time that we used to speak our minds. What self-censorship is doing, and it's also, I mean, I don't blame journalists when they're censoring themselves, because there are editors who are who in an attempt to not lose access are censoring on themselves, and we are all censoring ourselves so that tomorrow we don't face a defamation notice. Till such time that I faced a criminal charge in Ghaziabad police for my tweet last year, where 3 Muslim journalists and 3 Muslim activists were booked for by the UP police. I would tweet without any filters, but now I often tweet and delete because I don't know what are going to be the repercussions of the tweet. For instance, all of you might be witnessing what's happening between Israel and Palestine since last night. I was on an editorial call last night, and you're seeing all those tweets, and you see Indian Twitter trends, right? It's nauseating. It's nauseating to see what Indian Twitter is tweeting about Palestine, and the way, the glee that they're expressing over the possible pounding of Palestinians. And I've not seen something like this before, this moral corruption that I see in India. I think it's worse than censorship, the moral corruption of an entire country. And I was going to tweet something about Israel and Palestine, right? About apartheid, about colonization. And I held myself back, saying, if I tweet this, then the hyenas will come after me. They will hound me. It's not just the state that hounds you. We have an entire factory of trolls, okay? And where some of them are the well-meaning people also who come at you for what they believe is an attack on sovereignty, what they believe is an attack on liberal ideas. I mean, people are not viewing. Journalism, for me, was always about the oppressor and the oppressed. People say, can we take sides in journalism? I don't think there are sides in journalism. I think there are just 2 sides. There's a side of the oppressor and the side of the oppressed. As a journalist, the only person whose story that you need to report passionately is the oppressed. And that is something you know as soon as you go on the ground. Now, when I report on it and when I tweet about it, if I have to dilute my words in talking about the oppressed, I think I have lost the battle right there. If I'm diluting my words, if I'm diluting my sentiments, I think I have lost the battle significantly. If I'm not speaking my mind, a part of me has lost the battle already. And that is where I think we are in the present day and age, that as journalists, we were supposed to bear witness. Somebody asked a question earlier, what is the journalism? Journalism is just to write what you see without any filters. And that's self-censorship. What we are witnessing right now is we are putting filters on the truth that we see. We are not calling a spade a spade. We are reading out handouts from the government. We're talking about the NewsClick FIR. I saw mainstream media just put the FIR right there. Most of the mainstream, I'm not talking about the independent press. The mainstream media was just putting out the FIR. So in a country of 1.4 billion people, not everybody accesses fact-checking websites. Not everybody accesses independent news platforms, like Scroll, News Minute. They don't read all of them. What they get is the Times of India or an NDTV on their platform every day. By the time the headline comes to them, NewsClick is already an enemy of the state for them, right? It happens with everybody. It happens with all the students who were arrested for the Shaheen Bagh protest or the citizenship protest, right? The version of the state was made the headline. The truth became the ultimate casualty.
So I think it's the journey towards, of course, there are slogans for one nation, one leader, and one tax. And is it also towards one voice? One voice.
That is, I think, the attempt is to homogenize one language, which is the language of the government. If you saw the ruling party's tweet yesterday on Israel, what is happening? In a democracy, it has no place for that, right? I mean, but everybody is supposed to speak a language which is comfortable and which does not disrupt anybody. Everybody is trying to be popular, so they're not trying to disrupt the narrative. And when you make an attempt to not disrupt the narrative, you end up speaking the same language that one person is speaking to the other. That's what is happening in journalism platforms across. We're all speaking one language. Thank God for alternate media, which I believe is a backlash against the backlash. You know, there was a backlash against the mainstream media, and the independent websites that came against the backlash, I think, are the new journalism. But again, I think we're all speaking one language, and the language is the language of the state by and large. And I think that is what we are up against. We are up against the homogenization of the stated truth as we know it, and that is a very, very dangerous problem that we are witnessing right now.
You see, in fact, when we speak of arguments, arguments occur when there are two opinions. Whenever and wherever there are two opinions, there will be arguments. And argument is based on dissent, the right to dissent, the voice of dissent. So, when a journalist does his duty, quite often he will have to dissent with the establishment. He will have to tell the regime, the state, that this is wrong. And these days we know that the regime may not like it. And do you think that Prabir Purkayastha, we don't have many dissenting voices these days? Most of the media have fallen in line. But still there are some media, who really raise this voice of dissent. So the regime, the authority, the power, they really want no dissents, no protests, no different opinions. Is it so?
I think there are dissenting voices. It's a different thing that many of them are behind bars under UAPA. There are dissenting voices. Let's not completely blank them out. There are dissenting voices in the form of young journalists who are bringing us the truth every day. Otherwise, the hate crimes that are happening, the lynchings that are happening would not be known to us. So whether your question was about dissent.
Yeah.
I think there are many of us who are dissenting, but whose stories are not being told. I mean, everybody gathered at the press club to speak about NewsClick, but how many of us are speaking about journalists in Kashmir? Right? We are also self-censoring ourselves in the sense that we are speaking for one set of journalists, but we're not speaking for other set of journalists. Journalists in Kashmir are being slapped with NSA, Public Security Act. NIA gives them a call. NIA lands up at their doorstep every morning, at their family's doorstep. I think we are not speaking loud and clear enough for journalists in Kashmir. We are not speaking loud and clear enough for journalists in Manipur. These are the dissenting voices who do not have any cushion or support system for them. I think we need to speak in solidarity with them. The Siddiq Kapan, for instance. Siddiq Kapan is an example. Siddiq Kapan was behind bars for 2 years, right? And when he was being released, a slap money laundering charge against him. I did not see the kind of solidarity for Siddiq Kapan which should have been there. Now, probably I'm wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong here. But I really don't see the kind of solidarity for young journalists in Mufassil areas who do not get the solidarity that journalists in mainstream cities like Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore receive. Right? We also need solidarity. Does not just mean to express journalists in Delhi and Bombay. People ask me, my targeted. I have good lawyers. I have television platforms. I have international organizations who stand in solidarity with me. But there are so many young journalists who Rupesh Kumar Singh in Chhattisgarh, under UAP, how many of us know about him? We don't talk about these journalists because it's in Chhattisgarh. It's happening in Uttarakhand. For us, journalism is what happens in metro cities. So I feel that there are dissenting journalists who are doing an excellent job with absolutely no cover. But yes, mainstream media is compromised. It's not something that I'm revealing to you here. It's a known fact. I have stopped watching television sometimes when I have to get my dopamine hit. I watch it because sometimes you have to report on it. Sometimes when you have to report on the moral degradation of society, you have to watch mainstream media because it's the best way to understand the moral degradation of society. I have never viewed myself, and I put it out there, I've never viewed myself as a Muslim journalist. And the last 4 years, I have been seen as a Muslim journalist. And initially, it used to really bother me, But I have seen that the attacks and the trolling that I witness on Twitter, right? Since I tweeted about Palestine last night, the trolling is jihadist, ISIS sex slave. BJP Twitter handles have called me a jihadist. BJP Karnataka Twitter handle has called me a jihadist. So the abuse that comes your way, the reason why you picked up is because of your Muslimness. And some of us are also now what was happening in America back in the day during the civil rights movement, that black American writers were talking about their blackness, about being people of color and putting it in their writing. I think we are at a time when a lived experience is an asset and not a liability. That we should be proud of our lived experience as journalists, what we have seen growing up here. So, if for instance, if a Sikh journalist writes about his family's lived experience during the 1984 anti-Sikh riots, I would see that as a strength, as opposed to him bringing his personal experience, right? So I think we are reimagining journalism, where a lot of, like Rajagopalan spoke about, neutrality. None of us, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? We are living at a time where there is no space for neutrality, right? For instance, the Delhi riots, everybody said what's happening in Delhi is Delhi riots. On one side, you have the Information and Broadcasting Minister now, Anurag Thakur, saying Desh ke gaddaron ko goli maro salo ko. On one side, you have ministers giving hate speech. On one side, you have the police force attacking the protesters. You have the machinery, you have almost the lower judiciary in yours. And the other hand are people who are reacting to the provocation. It's not an equal footing. How do you call it a riot? So we also as journalists need to reimagine the terminology that we use for the present times that we are living in. These are not normal times. We are living in a majoritarian time. So we need to reimagine and reassess our journalism for it to coexist with the times that we are living in.
Rana, you spoke about the need to stand together, the need for solidarity, collaborative networking. I think they are essential in these days to survive, You have been fighting many battles. You have been traveling from one city to another city to face the cases. And at those moments, you might have felt the need to stand together. You might have felt that if there is someone else to stand by your side and support you. My question is, you are writing for an international publication, an American newspaper. So, how do you see the difference in the West or in the developed countries and the situation, the scenario right now in India?
Vis-a-vis solidarity?
Solidarity.
It is really heartening to see the solidarity for NewsClick. That's what I'm saying. I think they answered the question earlier, that the solidarity is there, but it should also be very inclusive. The solidarity that we see right now is not very inclusive, right? What is happening to NewsClick right now has been happening to individual cases over the past 7-8 years. If we had spoken loud and clear then, possibly we would not be in this situation right now, right? So I think I'm glad to see a press club full of journalists giving statements without ifs and buts. I think this is something that should have happened when it happened to the first journalist. When the first journalist was arrested, when the first journalist was censored, when the first journalist had a defamation case against him, when the first journalist had a UAPA case against him, when the first journalist had an ED case against him, we should have said this is an assault. I wrote an article in 2013, which is 1 year before Mr. Modi came to power, saying that I am a journalist who was reported from Gujarat, and I know in the next 5 years the ultimate casualty of Mr. Modi, if he becomes a prime minister, will be journalism, because here is a man in the world's largest democracy, who in the 9 years has not taken a single press conference. He's done exactly what he did in Gujarat. There was a sedition case against Ashish Nandi, right? There were sedition cases against journalists in Gujarat, which you might not be aware of. But back in the day, and I'll also give you another example. Everybody is not talking about how NewsClick FIRs are being reported verbatim and there is no critical assessment. As a journalist who was then in Gujarat reporting the extrajudicial murders, they call it fake encounters, I call it extrajudicial murders, they're all the same probably. But back in the day, every time there was a fake encounter, an encounter by the Gujarat police, whether it's Ishrat Jahan, Sohrabuddin, Tulsi Prajapati, Sadiq Jamal, the numbers are huge. All these fake encounters happened to create this image of Modi as a Hindu leader under attack from Muslims, right? This is how Modi's leader as a Hindu leader was built. But I'll give you a small trivia. So because I was in Gujarat and I was reporting, every time these fake encounters would happen, the Gujarat police would have an FIR. Okay, and the FIRs would be very interesting. They would start from the independence movement. One day I sat with all the FIRs in all the cases. In Ishrat Jahan, Sadiq Jamal, Tulsi Ram, Sohrabuddin, I realized the first 7 paragraphs are copy-paste. They've not even changed it. Now, I do not believe that the Gujarati media could not see that, which is something which is right there in the eye, right? They were literally not pointing out that the first 7 paragraphs saying India got independence in 1947, then it was under attack by jihadis, then this happened, and then the story of this. So if the media wants, the facts are right there. You don't even have to do a lot of digging. That's exactly what was happening in Gujarat then, is happening pan-India now in the mainstream publications. They do not want to know the fallacies in the FIR. They are just going to report what is going to get them more hits and what is going to create an enemy for the state and in the eyes of the people. So that kind of, and the solidarity, I feel like, I keep repeating this, the top editors in the country will still get solidarity. The bottom line are the unpopular journalists who will not get solidarity. My concern time and again is for them. When the NewsClick thing happened, a couple of young journalists, they were sending me messages on Instagram. One of them said, my father is saying leave the profession. He's 24 and he's an excellent journalist and he keeps writing to me. And I said, what do you think? He said, I actually fear because my family does not have the resources for it. So we also have to address questions that tomorrow, if young journalists are arrested, how do they fight the cases? Do we have a set of pro bono lawyers? Do we look after their mental health? It is one thing to have lawyers, but please understand, a lot of us journalists are also battling this mental health crisis. There are days, I've been seeing a psychiatrist for 12 years now, it's a different thing, but the last couple of years, it has taken a huge toll on my mental health because every time the brown envelope comes and it comes in a speed post, a part of me just goes into a shell. In a sense, I'm like, okay, I know the case is I will fight this, but when you receive that envelope from the government, right, you lose your day. You cannot function that day. After I come back from court, I cannot function or I cannot write. Last year when the ED filed the FIR against me, there were cameras. I wasn't trending on Twitter for 3 days. I was in the headline. And I'll give you one small example. There was a Times Now journalist who came at my doorstep. So I opened the door. I was in my nightwear. And I opened the door. She said, is Rana Ayyub inside? And I just looked at her because, these journalists don't even know who they're looking for. And I'm on the 7th floor. They planted a camera in the 7th floor of the opposite building and they said, we are getting first views from her living room. I can't tell you how intrusive that felt. And when the charge sheet was filed against me, I was in Chicago for 2 months to teach my, again, Times Now Republic at my doorstep. The door was opened by my 6-year-old nephew wants to run and open the door. He opened the door and the cameras went on him. They don't deserve this. My family does not deserve this. I have thrown my entire family under the bus because the choices that I have made and the kind of trauma and humiliation that I face every single day when I'm asked to face, it's one thing to go in front of the investigating agency, but the second is to go into the court of law and sit with all other criminals, and you're made to sit with criminals and the hearing keeps getting adjourned and you still sit there and you're made to sit there. By the time you come back home, you don't have the bandwidth to report.
Yeah, it also affects your physical health, no?
And the physical health. I have had three corrective surgeries in the last 2 years. I've started blood pressure medication since last year. I'm on an anxiety medication for the last 2 years. I'm on antidepressant. So yes, and I'm not complaining. This is a choice I have made consciously. This is not something that was inflicted on me. But the thing is, when we make a choice, we do expect a level of solidarity from our colleagues. And this is not for me, the ones who do not have the solidarity. I am very much in the public space. I am very much in the media glare. I have a social media profile, I have an international profile. The ones who do not get that solidarity, please understand that fighting the legal case is one thing, fighting the emotional battle is another.
When you started your career, the media landscape was entirely different. and now I think it has undergone some drastic changes. So were you to begin your career today, would you still opt for journalism?
I would all over again. In fact, all the more reason that I would be a journalist today. But in fact, when I started my career in journalism, the things were not as rosy. In fact, I remember I joined a news channel which is not very respectable these days. But when I joined the news channel, my bureau chief said, you can do entertainment, you can do lifestyle, you can do health. I said, but I want to do political reporting. And the editor said, listen, I'm talking about 2006, 2007. He said, Rana, please be practical. For political reporting, you have to go get a drink with politicians, sit with them at night, and then they give you stories, right? So there was a hostility, and there was not hostility, I feel like there was still a kind of resistance to the idea of women journalists. I'm not sure if this experience is uniform or probably I was the only one, but there was a sense of, and back in the day, I think some of us covered the other scam, right? Every single day, no, I do not believe that journalists were in fear of the Manmohan Singh regime. I mean, yes, the Congress is not without its faults. Yes, the UAPA that we have is a gift of the Congress to us, so let's not even gloss over that. But the kind of fear that we feel today was not there earlier. But having said that, coming back to your question, I think now is a more interesting time to be a journalist. You know, it's one thing to be a journalist when you know that there wouldn't be much backlash. But the kind of backlash that is there today, somebody like me who loves the kind of excitement, I would go for it, and I would be a journalist in today's time, because it is, like I said, it is a crucial thing to be a journalist when the state is against you. When you become an enemy of the state, that is the time when journalism shines. When there is so much oppression against journalism, and then you still write and dissent, I think that's the time when journalism truly shines, and I think this is the virtue of the present time. I really feel that journalists should consider themselves fortunate that we are living in a time where journalism is an act of rebellion, right? I know it's also comes with its share of trauma and its cases, but trust me, it has never been a more interesting and important time to be a journalist in the history of the country as it is now.
So you are confident, very optimistic that journalism will survive.
Journalism has survived some of the worst onslaughts. I do hope the morale of journalists is not affected. I do genuinely hope that the morale of journalists who do not have the resources are affected, because on one hand they are out there getting the top stories, and then they see their editors cutting deals with the government, their editors going to have dinners and attending the weddings. I mean, honestly, when I see journalists taking pictures at some politician's son's wedding, it is cringe-worthy. It is cringe-inducing when they are in queue, and I come from a school of thought we're not supposed to socialize. But I have optimism in the young journalists of this country. I have optimism in the independent media outlets, and we have seen worse as a country. I know it's only going to get worse from here. And but I see hope in a lot of these young journalism students who have gathered here. I met some of them outside. I think they give me hope, and they encourage me to go on the field and report with as much passion. You know, the way they ask you questions, the way they send me those Instagram DMs, and on Twitter and Facebook they send me messages saying, we love you, we love what you do, and we want to be like you. I feel like if I take a step back, won't they feel disillusioned? Right? They will feel that, okay, there's no way forward. So some of us have to stick around for them to feel optimistic.
You see, during emergency, Indira, in fact, led on her own. He didn't have the backup, the support of a very, very organized ideological movement. She was on her own most of the times. But these days we know that the regime, the state, it has the support of a very well organized movement that can reach out to any person anywhere in India. Now, during emergency, Indira faced a real challenge from the media. We know how the Indian Express fought the authoritarian regime. But I think we have to note a point there. Ideologically too, I think Ramnath Goenka, the owner of the Indian Express Group, and many of the national big newspapers, they were ideologically on the other side. They were not socialists. They were not. Many of them were not socialists. They really had some right-wing ideas, and they always felt that Indira's government was not their government. But these days, some of the major newspapers, the major establishments, do they feel that this government is their government? Do you think so?
I am not a part of any major newspaper in India, so I would not know what how they feel. I know Mr. Rajgopalan's newspaper is putting some of the bravest headlines, and that's the first thing I go and read. I will see what's the Telegraph headline of the day, and I feel reassuring. But I don't know what is happening with the mainstream media. I will only go by. I have no access to any of these mainstream media journalists. I have no communication with them, so I have no idea what's happening in the rank and file of those publications. I will only go by what I see, and what I see is editors prostrating before those in power, not physically, but prostrating through their acts, where it is frustrating. And I mean, these are some of them were earlier well-meaning journalists, and I used to see them. These are journalists who reported the Gujarat carnage back in the day in 2002, and I've seen them reporting live on TV. And I see some of these anchors have reported the fake encounters in Gujarat, and now I see them. Now I see them taking a stated position, right? Everything becomes an attack on the sovereignty of the country. There was a time when activism, citizenship protest by the citizens was seen as a democratic idea. Now, because of mainstream media, the way Shaheen Bagh, the way the citizenship protest, the way the farmers protest, the way it was demonized by the mainstream press, I feel like I don't think they have an ideology. I think their ideology is access and to be seen on the big screen. I don't think they have an ideology per se. I think their ideology, some of them look brazenly right-wing. Now, I don't know if that is an act that they're putting on, but I think their ideology clearly is to have their jobs and to be and to have access to the government, right?
No. Is it a question of ideology, or is it a question of a Faustian bargain?
I think it's a question of opportunism. I think most of them are opportunists. You give them an opportunity to host a live prime time. You give them access. We were talking about Mohammed bin Salman earlier, the Saudi Crown Prince. When the Saudi Crown Prince was here, Mr. Modi's government got 4 top journalists from the mainstream publication to go shake hands with them. I mean, why were they given access? One, nobody wants to shake hands with Mohammed bin Salman, but why were those journalists given access? So all these journalists want to get access during the G20 with world leaders. So I think they will do what the government wants them to do. Now, it's a moral choice that they're making.
This concept of media as opposition, that media should be eternally in opposition to the power holders. Do you concur with that view? Media should be eternally on the side of the opposition. Means media should...
No, I don't think media should be on the side of the opposition. Being critical of the government doesn't make you a cheerleader of the opposition. It's very simple.
No. My question is this. Should media be always on the side of opposition? Means should it always oppose the power?
Right. I think you should... Every time you see any government, any political party do wrong, you need to oppose them. It's not about opposing for the sake of opposing. I think we cannot be seen as pro-establishment. That's not the very nature of journalism. So the very nature of journalism is to question the wrongdoings. So
do we miss that feature these days?
I mean, that's what the conversation has been about, that we do not have a mainstream media, and we do not have the questioning spirit in a majority of the press.
So how do you think that we could overcome this crisis?
I think the only way we could overcome this crisis is to do our journalism. I think there is no other solution than doing our journalism, and to have each other's back, and to have these conversations, and to have all stakeholders, and not to talk in echo chambers, but talk to each other and come to a solution. I think that's the only solution that I can speak about. The only solution to fascism across the globe at any given point of time is to not do the both sides narrative. It's an argument that is going on in America right now. It's an argument that India also needs. Americans are now discussing if there are two sides to a story. We're talking talking about what the Biden administration and the coverage of Biden administration vis-a-vis Trump, and Americans are talking about should we have two sides to a story. I think that argument should have always been there as a means of storytelling. There are no two sides. Like I said, the only sides in journalism are the oppressor and the oppressed, right? In America, for instance, everybody is saying, but we know Trump is wrong, but Biden is also aging and Biden has also done that. You see the essential evil. You talk about the essential evil first, right? You see a man who wants to bring in the worst kind of fascism. You see a man who wants to openly talks about attacking migrants and Muslims and minorities. You see a man who's destabilizing the institutions of the country. You see a man who's attacking the institutions of the country. When you see that kind of a demon, then there are no two sides to it. Same thing in India. We have a government that is systematically attacking institutions of justice. The good thing about America so far is that except for Kashmir and Palestine, I see everybody is a liberal. But barring that, if you understand, the American media by and large has been anti-establishment and has been questioning. They have their courts, they have their judiciary which supports them, they have the First Amendment which supports them. In India right now, I think by the time the Supreme Court gets into the picture to give bail to a dissident or an activist or a journalist, it's years. I mean, look at Umar Khalid. It's been 3 years since Umar Khalid has been behind bars. It's been 2 years since Sharjeel Imam is behind bars. And we are still following due process.
Yeah, definitely. We always nurture hope within our hearts, Every morning we wake up because we think that the world is going to change for the better. Now, the one silver lining that you see in today's media landscape that makes you more confident, more optimistic.
The one
silver lining.
Silver lining is all those young journalists who were at the press club to oppose it is all the young journalists who know that they have UAP and sedition staring at them and they're still reporting the stories with no ifs and buts. My silver lining is all those people who know that they are at great risk to their lives are reporting the truth. My silver lining is the young journalists sitting here in the room who know that there is a sedition charge waiting for them and they still want to come to journalism conferences and listen to optimistic conversations. My silver lining is the essential idea of India and the belief that a good part of India, a good population of this country does not believe in fascism and that we will rise against this and someday that we do love our neighbors and this hate will not be all pervasive and probably that's my only hope for this country.
I think we will take up some questions from the audience. Sure. I have received some questions on my phone. So this question is from Mr. Abraham Joseph. In a system and age in which electoral bonds and paid news articles, editorials are allowed, how do we say, if it is true or not, means how do we say a Chinese investment in an Indian media is wrong? Should paid news ever have been allowed?
I didn't understand. What is paid
news? No, he says in a system and age in which electoral bonds and paid news are allowed, how can we say that a Chinese investment in an Indian media is wrong?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I think as readers we need to be. My answer will be a little different. I think we need to be more discerning of what we read, and we need to make these choices for ourselves about what we read and who we choose to read. Yes, it is a very complicated time about media ownerships and who is owning them, and yes, a lot of news is state-enabled news. I won't call it paid news. It's because of the kind of advertisements that publications and the revenues that they receive. So yeah, I won't get into the Chinese part. That is going to get all of us into trouble right now. But let's figure first. Let it be established that there was some Chinese interference, and then for us to talk about it.
Yeah. I think there are two questions from Mathrubhumi Media School. But I think you have answered partly to these questions during our interaction. But anyway, I will raise these questions again. What is the future of journalism, India versus globally? And why is that there is no solidarity among journalists? Is it because the journalist lost the passion of being a journalist?
What have we lost?
Is it because that journalists these days don't have the passion to be a journalist? No. Yeah, there is a solidarity, and is it because the journalists have lost the passion to be a journalist?
Trying to understand that question, but yeah, I think solidarity, like I said, I've already spoken about the solidarity bit, that it's not very inclusive. I don't think journalists have lost the passion to be journalists. I do think they're very much passionate about their journalism. I don't think they have an atmosphere that is conducive to do good journalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is one more question. Being a journalist who has been to many global platforms, as a speaker, as a panelist, as a teacher, what is the perception people have about Indian journalism now and a decade ago?
That's a tricky one. I don't think they have an opinion about Indian journalism per se, although some of them have done stories on Arnab Goswami's style of journalism. So I don't even consider that journalism, so I'm not going to comment. But they do believe a lot of Indian journalists write for international publications, and they have a very high opinion of some journalists who are doing good work. But yes, they are very well aware that mainstream media in India has in a way collapsed, and a lot of good work is being done by international publications, barring a few exceptions in India.
And there is one more question. Do they think we are courageous? I don't know who the questioner refers to by they. Do they think we are courageous? Do they think we are situationist, opportunist? Do they think we do a good job?
Who's we here? I don't know. I don't know again what the question is, but I think some of them are courageous, some of them are opportunists. It depends on who we are talking about. So the question is not very clear to me.
Yeah, right. And any more questions?
Yes, please.
So, I think we don't have.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. This is the worst part of my job, but I have to do it. We will not be taking live questions because we have sessions lined up back to back. So there's a number that will be displayed on the screen. So all your questions, yes, you can send it. Whatever we can address on stage here, we will do today. And the rest, I'm sure we will find a space to speak
Absolutely.
about that.
I'm around. You can always ask me questions. I'm right here, and you can always ask me the questions.
Thank you, Rana. And thank you all for understanding. It's just that we have more wonderful sessions coming, so we need to keep it going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.